Okay, check. We did that one. Boom. Change the obstacle generation. So right now, all of those spiky things are being created at exactly the same interval and the exact same place. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here. All right. Also, it's too hard to play this to even demonstrate. So see how they're all the exact same distance apart and they're all pretty much in the same place. I guess they're slightly like Are they even the exact same height? No. Some of them are taller than others. But that's the only variation, like slightly higher on the screen. So we want a little more variety with this. So let's find out where that is controlled. It is moving, pause game, game playing, pipe spawn. So originally they were called pipes, even though they look more like mountains. Create pillars with a hole at a random vertical position. Okay, so here we've got a timer, pipe spawn, and every 2.5 seconds it is creating a new set of pipes. So it'll create a top one and a bottom one, and it sets the Z order to 1, and it will change the animation of both of them to random. We'll get to that later, but so let's say, let's just close this, add variation to the spawn location and the gap between the obstacles. Alright, so we don't want them always at the same place and always at the same time. So instead of it always being 2.5 seconds, let's make a new variable that we can change this. Okay, so I'm going to go here. Well, let's add the variable up here. So add action, other actions, variables, change variable value. So let's have a variable called next spawn time. Okay, and here I'm going to, once I've typed it, I click add or edit variables, and it adds it to our list of game variables. Next spawn time, number, yes, apply. Okay, set it to, well, let's have it start at 2.5 like it originally was. Alright, so here, change variable, next spawn time set to 2.5. Then let's scroll down here. So this is at the start of the game, right? It only does this once at the beginning of the scene. Then down here, pipe spawn, the timer pipe spawn is greater than 2.5 seconds. So we don't want it to always be 2.5 like this. We want to use that variable we just made. What did I call it? Spawn, next spawn time. See, I just started typing something in the name and it brought up any variable that includes that next spawn time. Okay, so now if the timer pipe spawn is greater than next spawn time seconds. So at the start, that equals 2.5. So the very first time that it does it, it will be 2.5 seconds. But then after that, let's go down here with all these actions. Let's go add an action and go other and variables, change variable value, next spawn time. Let's choose a random number. How do we do that? So set to value, I'm just going to start typing the word random. And there's a few options here. We want to do random float in range. Is what, well, let's just do random in range for now. Random in range. So what that means is you have to put, it'll put these words here and then parentheses. And inside here you need to put two numbers. So the first one is the smallest number. So if I put 1 and then I put a comma, and then I put the highest number. So here it's telling you first the minimum value, then the maximum. So let's say I put a 2. So that means it'll choose a random number between 1 and 2. In this case, there's only 2 options to choose from. Let's hit OK. Alright, so now next spawn time is a random number, and then it'll restart, goes back to the beginning of the code, does this again. So if next spawn time equals 1, then it comes back here. After 1 second, then it will do all this again. Let's try it. Hey, those two were closer together than before. So it looks like it was alternating. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So those were 1 second apart. These others are 2 seconds apart. So that's how that works. If you want to have more options, so this random in range means that they're always integers, so whole numbers. If instead, let's double click this and change it to random float in range. So that means that they can be decimals. So I still put the minimum and the maximum, but the minimum could be 0.5, no, not 0.0, 0.5, and maybe the maximum is 3.5. So you still have a comma in between them. And now it'll choose any decimal in between those two numbers. So it might choose 1.75, or it might choose 2.0032 or something. Who knows? Now let's see. Alright, so now we're getting a lot more variety of how often they're generating the obstacles. Okay, then how about create object top pillar at position. Look, they have already been using the random in range. So right now, every time it creates a top pillar, it will create it somewhere between 30 and 110. And what does this mean? Well, let's double click on this to go inside. Okay. So it's going to create the object. Its X position will always be 450, and then only the Y position is being random. And then a layer is blank. So let's look at what this means here. I'll hit OK. So if I go back here and I move my mouse around, see down here how these numbers change? So this is telling you the coordinates of your mouse. So this starting pillar right now is at X 442 and Y 75. So I think it's going by the center of it, because yeah, if I put my mouse right at Y 75 right there and X 442, yeah, so we're right in the middle. Alright, so remember those numbers. So then when we go back here, it's always creating it at X 450. So 450 is right about here, yeah. So that means when it gets created, it's off the screen, it's off the right edge. And then the Y is always somewhere in between 30 and 110. So that means if I'm just going to move my mouse up and down, so right, where's 30 at? Right about here. So the middle of the mountain might be right there, or 110 is right about here. So it's putting the middle of it somewhere in this range. I could also move this up and down. So here is Y30. So that looks like, or Y110. Looks like that. So if we want to have more variety, we could just change the number of that Y. So what if we go over here, game, and set this to, let's have the minimum number be 0 and the maximum number be 150. Well, first I'd want to go back. What if this is set at 150? Well, we might have some problems, because look, there it is at 150, and it'll just be floating in the air. So 150 is probably too, looks like 118 is like the lowest or the highest number we'd want in there. Okay, so we'll put that back at 118. Okay, and then it will always create a bottom pillar at, what does this mean? Top pillar dot y. So whatever the y coordinates of this one that just got created, it will create the bottom pillar at 350 lower than that. So let's see here. So if our y, let's just set this at 110, or 100, I mean. Okay, so that's what it looks like if it creates it at y coordinate 100. And then it will always do the bottom pillar at 350 lower than that. So what is 100 plus 350? It is 450. So that means that's how far apart they would be. This one's at 100, that's at 450. It'll have a gap that size. So if we want this gap to be different sometimes, then let's go here, and so we could keep all this, and then I'm just going to add a plus sign, and then let's add another random number in here. Random in range, so we'll do that, an integer. And let's say sometimes we want it smaller than that, sometimes we want it bigger than that. So let's try -10 for the smallest, and +10 for the biggest. So that way, sometimes the gap will be 350 minus 10, or sometimes it might be that plus 10. Let's test this out. Alright. Hey, that one looks a little bigger than others. So we could probably change those numbers too, so there's even more variety. Oh, and we're gonna have some problems too if they get too close together, but whatever. Let's try it at 30, and well, that's probably going to be way too small. You won't be able to fit a plane in between there. So probably the smallest we'd want it would be -10, and then the biggest we could add 30 more to the gap. Let's try this. Okay, that's working. It's not a huge difference, but sometimes they're farther apart than others. Like that, yeah. Okay, awesome. Moving on to our next, alright, so we added variation to the spawn location. That's this one. And then we added variation to the gap in between obstacles. That's this one. And we sped up how often they are created. Not always sped up, but like it's not always 2.5 seconds anymore. Okay, got that covered.